This is part 2 of my one-on-one with Michael Kitces, the man who needs no introduction. In this episode, he shared his process for improving as a speaker, the importance of business storytelling, and what to do if you think your clients only are interested in facts and figures. And my favorite part of the episode comes at the end, where Michael tells us his principles for laying the foundation of a successful digital empire. Hi, I'm Deirdre Van Nest, and you're listening to the Crazy Good Talks podcast. I created this podcast because I'm obsessed with helping financial professionals and entrepreneurs like you express yourself in a way that attracts and wins you more business. Plus, I want to help you make a huge impact on the lives of others. That's why each episode is packed with actionable strategies to help develop your speaking, storytelling, and content creation skills. Skills that allow you to effortlessly make emotional connections with your ideal clients. I'm so excited to take you on this journey because when you learn these skills, your influence and your impact will be limitless. Let's jump in to today's episode. All right, we are back with Michael Kitces. And Michael, in part 1 of this 2-part episode, you gave us your journey from being an advisor to advicer, which I'll have you define for us in a moment, to speaker, and what that was like, and how you just had a drive and a passion, and how you turned that into a speaking career, and how you went from free to fee. And in this episode, I want to take a deeper dive on that. But first, what does advisor mean? I love that term, but tell our listeners what that means. I think it's pretty cool.
So a little context, I guess this is a little inside baseball for the financial advisor industry. So, advisors will take this a different way than the other entrepreneurs who may be listening. So, financial advisor, traditionally written, is frankly a really overgeneralized term. Like, it's literally not a regulated term. Anybody can say they're a financial advisor. If you're going to get paid for the advice, either by selling a product or charging a fee, there is a licensing requirements to get paid, but not to use the title. And even the licensing requirements to get paid are actually pretty low bars. Like they don't test whether you know anything about money or investments. They're basically sales licenses or licenses to determine that you understand the laws that will apply to you for what you're doing. But there's no test for advice associated with being a financial advisor. And just mathematically, literally writ large across the industry, the majority of people who use financial advisor in their title, their actual license is as a financial salesperson to sell products and earn commissions for the sale of products. And so, I'm someone who has a lot of passion around the actual business of advice and giving people advice. Nothing against the product side. I started out my career on the product side. Ultimately, people do actually need a lot of financial services products for very positive reasons. But I think it's really important to draw a line between when you're engaging a salesperson and when you're engaging someone for actual advice, not pursuant to a sale. At least I want to know, I understand when I go in the Gap and they say the pants look good on me, we all understand how this relationship works. I do appreciate you've helped me find the pants in the right size and a little bit of off the cuff advice about whether it looks good on me, but I understand that you work on commission and I will take your comments on my looks with a grain of salt. If I hire someone to be my fashion consultant, I expect you to actually give me advice about my fashion.
Yes.
And I say that tongue in cheek because I have absolutely no fashion sense at all. My brand is wearing the same shirt and I own 12 of them, so I don't have to figure out what to wear.
Which we love. We love this blue shirt.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
So I try to make a distinction between the people who are financial advisors, air quotes, some of whom are in the product business and some of whom are in the advice business, and the people who are purely in the business of giving advice and getting paid for advice. And so I call that group financial advisors. On our site, we have a whole financial advisor manifesto about what it really takes and what it means to really be in the financial advice business and to be a financial advisor. But that ultimately is our mission, even from our platform, is making financial advisors better and more successful. And so we've got a lot of educational material. We give on both the technical side, how to give better advice, and the business and career and practice management side, how to have a more successful career or build a better business as a financial advisor, all for just the particular focus of the people who are in the business of actually selling the knowledge between their ears and getting someone else to pay you for it, which is very different than selling a product. Not to knock the product side, but just selling a product is different than selling yourself.
Absolutely. And this is one of the ways. This is one of the ways you avoid commoditization is by doing that. Okay, absolutely. Great. Awesome. I love that. All right. So let's go back to speaking. We were talking about going from free to fee. We talked about experience. So I'm curious to know, how do you personally prep for a presentation? And over the 17 years, how have you continuously improved as a speaker? You know, one of my mentors, Craig Valentine, who's just an incredible speaker, said, let me see if I can get this right. If you practice doing the wrong things, you'll just get better at doing it wrong. Does that make sense? So like, so it's like people will be like, yeah, I'm good at practice a lot, but are you practicing the right things? So what have you done to get better and make sure you're practicing the right things?
So a couple of things. I think the first starting point for me was almost every event out there these days, and more or less since forever, like has some kind of feedback that they do, right? You know, the association of the events, what'd you think of the event? What'd you think of the speaker? Please provide the comments, rate them on 1 to 5 or whatever it is. I would get that feedback. I would ask the events for that feedback, because not a lot of them share, or not a lot of them share by default. Reach out to every single event after the event. Like, really appreciate speaking at your event. I hope we can work together again in the future. For the first almost 10 years, I wrote handwritten thank you notes to every single event organizer, just to connect with them and try to be memorable to them, because not a lot of other speakers do that. And I would always say, if you've collected feedback from your session evaluations, I would really appreciate if you would share all the feedback, all the written comments that came in, good or bad. We take this as feedback to get better. Collectively, royal we was mostly I like to talk in we terms. We take this feedback to get better, and I would actually read every comment on every eval that was sent along. And so some of it's good, some of it's not good. There'll always be not something, like, no matter how amazing a speaker is,
doesn't matter.
Someone's going to think that, like, the person sucked, or, for everyone who thinks a speaker is great, someone else says they were too cocky. And for everyone who says, like, that speaker was really humble, someone else is like, I don't even know why I'm listening to him. That person was incredible. Like, there's always something. But looking at all of the feedback, looking at all of the negative feedback, because there's always some, looking for patterns in the negative feedback, because sometimes it's one screwy person, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, by the time I've gotten like the 17th comment that there's like the slides were unreadable, too many words in the slides, like, okay, I get it, I need to stop putting 1,000 words on every slide, which I absolutely did. Still do that sometimes, but did a lot of it back then. So just looking at the feedback, looking for at least the patterns in the feedback, and just listening to feedback.
Yeah.
When they say they don't like a thing, stop doing the thing.
Stop doing the thing.
Stop doing the thing. The second thing that I did was, and this didn't crop up often, particularly early on, because just I was doing a lot of local events. When I started getting events that were a little bit bigger, I would occasionally get events that would record the session, right? Because they're, do the audio and video setup, because they're, broadcasting or sending it virtually. That happens a lot more now because we live stream a lot of stuff. Back then, it was more like, we're recording this because we're putting it on a CD for people who are going to get it after the event. But like,
that we're going to mail out
with audio and video. And so I would ask for a copy. If I saw that they were recording, right? It's kind of obvious. You see the camera at the other end of the room. Anytime I saw they were recording, I would ask for a copy of the recording. I say, like, I'm not going to use it or sell it externally. Like, it's your thing for your event. Like, just for our internal purposes, we love to keep a copy of any sessions where we're recording. Could you please send us a copy? And so virtually all of them would cooperate and send a copy. And so I'd pop it in, just like pop the CD in, because that's most of what it was back then, and watch the recording, which usually was horrific.
Yeah, it's painful. It's painful in the beginning.
Part of it is just almost none of us like hearing ourselves talk. It sounds strange, because your voice literally sounds different to you recorded than when you hear it inside of your head from your voice box. We are always not always, but most people at least we're our own worst self-critics. So little overly harsh on ourselves, but boy, like, watch yourself speaking a couple of times, you will see a whole lot of stuff like, wow, I didn't even realize I do that. I need to not do that anymore. Speaking mannerisms, sometimes you realize something about your body language. Sometimes you'll notice you've got filler words that you use. You've got mannerisms that you don't like. Just look, you got to look at it, like, go back and look at the tape, right? Same thing, particularly in sports. Like, you got to go back and look at the tape. That's how you improve your behavior. And it works in the speaking realm as well. I know there are folks out there that will literally, like, do practice versions of their presentation in front of the camera, record it, go back and look at it. I'll admit, just at least for me, I never went there. But I would get recordings when events were recorded, and I would go back and look at the tape, and pretty self-evident very quickly of things that I could work on, improve. And so I did, right? I mean, again, we tend to think about this of, all the proverbial like 15 years of overnight success sort of stuff.
Uh-huh.
I've probably done 700 to 800 events now cumulatively over the years. So, you look at the tape, you spot a thing you probably need to improve on. And then for the next couple of months, like that's the thing I'm trying to roll up in my head to focus on, not everything, because I can't deal with all of it at once. It's going to depress myself if I try. I'm like, okay, there's at least one thing that I clearly sucked at more than all the other things that I suck at. I'm apparently not totally hopeless because people are paying me and asking me to come back, but I'm seeing where I want to focus and improve. So look at the tape, like, okay, that's the thing I want to improve on. It's a filler word. It's a mannerism. It's wow, I did a pretty good session, then basically slinked off the stage. Like that was a horrible close. I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to close on a higher note, whatever it was. And over time, just going back and looking at the tape and saying, okay, what am I going to try to do differently next time? Then I'm going to be practicing that in live audiences. I do my next few events, and at some point, someone else will record the event. And I'll go back and get another chance to look at the tape. Got a little better at that. Okay.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. This is something as a speaking coach that I tell my clients all the time. Pick the one thing you're going to work on for a period of time, get better at that, and then you can move on to the next. If you try to do everything, it's incredibly overwhelming. So that's a strategy that I also use too, is like, okay, what's the one thing in this presentation I'm going to work on? Right. Okay. What am I doing the next time? And so I really want you, for my listeners, like really hone in on the one thing. Get better at the one thing, and then you can move on to the next. But if you try to do 5, 10, 20, oh my gosh, like you forget it.
What the other thing, Frank, that I would note to that as well. I mean, I probably lucked into this a little bit indirectly in that I didn't have the realization that maybe I should have been recording myself early on, and it took a while. It took a few years before, frankly, I was getting new events that were large enough that they were recording and there was an opportunity. Probably would have happened faster now because we record more, but it wasn't as common then. It was a few years before I spent much time looking at the tape. And in retrospect, I think that was actually probably a good reason, like a good thing for two reasons. One, God, if I looked at the early tapes, it probably would have been so horrible. I just would have given up.
Totally get it.
Because I'm sure it was awful at the beginning. The second thing though is, I mean, I find this is really true for almost any type of skill that you're trying to build and develop. You have to get to a certain point where at least you can do the core thing unconsciously without thinking about it. Because that's what literally frees up enough presence of mind to be able to focus on a part of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
If the thing is not on autopilot, trying to think about the thing while you're doing the thing just overloads the brain and you shut down. I mean, I just remember living this even as a financial advisor, like the first few years, I'm just trying to figure out how to get through client conversations without stumbling on it. Now I have more than enough experience that as I'm seeing a client conversation, I'm not only having the client conversation, I'm thinking about like, how's my body language right now? How's the client's body language? How are they taking this? How's the environment doing? How am I feeling about the flow of this conversation? Because like I'm used enough to the conversations that I can have the presence of mind to do sort of the higher magnitude thinking, right? I even reflect on this with like teaching because I've got young children, like teaching my kids to ride a bike. If you try to explain all the things to do or ride a bike early on, like there's so much coming at them, they can't process it all. Like, how do you teach kids to ride a bike? Like just had them put their feet on the pedals. I grabbed the backside of the bike and dragged it along with them to keep them upright and just let them get used to steering and having the bike moving, having the pedals moving, having their feet moving. And after they got used to it for a while, then like I could let go of the bike and they could realize like, oh, I need to keep pedaling. If I slow down, like the bike falls over. But you can't, like your brain can't handle the presence of mind of trying to be self-aware about a thing while you're still learning the nuts and bolts of doing the thing initially. So it took a certain level of just raw practice and repetition, not even the structured feedback, just to literally do the thing a couple of times until I got to the point of, okay, I basically know, like, I know how I explain the AMT stuff. Like, I know I explain this stuff. I kind of know my pacing because I've just done this 10 or 20 times now. I sort of know how it flows, that I could then get a little bit of presence of mind of like, oh, I'm actually realizing as I'm on like the 17th bullet point on this slide that basically no one's looking at me anymore. Like they're looking away, they're looking off space. I'm pretty sure I've actually gone past the point on this and that I need to move on to the next slide. But like I couldn't even process that early on. I'm just trying to like read my own slides and not get lost in what I'm talking about.
No, that makes sense.
So recognize you got to get to a certain level of raw practice and comfort with your flow before you can even try to do the self-aware improvement stuff, or you're so much in your own head game, nothing's going to come out. You'll jumble yourself.
No, absolutely. I was talking with a leader in the industry, Keith Gillies over at UAG, and he was saying that he said, yeah, I coach basketball. And he goes, we had this saying that if the player had to think when they got on the court, they hadn't practiced enough. And the point of the practice is so when you get on the court, you don't have to think.
Yep.
And that's exactly it. When we work with clients, we recommend that they write out their presentations word for word. Now, does that mean it's said word for word? And it doesn't mean it's said word for word. What it means is that you practice it and you get into this groove enough so that when you get out there, you can be as natural as you want to be because it's ingrained. You don't have to think about what's coming next. And that is that's such a good point. I want to switch a little bit to storytelling. Obviously, I was on your podcast. We talked a lot about storytelling. We're all about storytelling and the importance in presentations, but also just in communication in general. So I'm curious to know, from your perspective, Michael, and what you're doing with your organization, how does storytelling play a role in your communication and where do you see it showing up?
Storytelling for me shows up in bits and pieces just all over it. It's just woven into a lot of our content. For anyone who's actually read articles on our site on Nerd's Eye View, like almost every article, the first section starts off with a story. Like I'm incapable of making a point without giving the backstory that leads up to the point first. To the extent that even when we write our executive summaries of our articles, the way that we write our executive summaries has a format, and it actually draws from the Disney Pixar formula of how to tell a story.
Love that.
So once upon a time, there was a blank, and every day they blank until one day blank happened. And then until finally. That's kind of, if you go back and look at any Pixar movie now, I've just ruined all the Pixar movies because they basically are.
Because that's it. You don't even need to watch them.
That's the whole formula. But it always starts off with once upon a time there was a blank, and every day they blank until one day something happened, it all changed, and that's what kicks off the story and the journey that we're going to be going on. And so I just sort of have this compulsion now. Anytime we're talking about something, I have to set that up first. So I call it something like setting the table or dressing the stage, because I just came from a theater background. That like we always have to set that up first. It's just kind of the foundational piece of let me give you a lead into this story about how we got here, and then I'm going to teach you or tell you the thing that we're going to be talking about, and then at the end I'll tell you what I told you.
Yeah.
So to me, it's part of what we do. I try to build that into even when we're teaching like nerdy tax law stuff, like let's take a moment and just talk about the crazy story about where this law actually came from, because funny thing, 2-minute journey about where that tax law came from, and then there we are. Some of our practice management content still got to have some kind of story journey of an advisor, historical industry context, some story journey about how we got to where we are. It shows up in our articles as well. I will grant I'm not one of those people that like there are folks out there that I feel like are master storytellers, and like every story is witty and has this amazing journey and all of these like analogies to the thing that's just immaculately written when you get to the end. You're like, oh, that was beautiful and perfect. Like, I'm not that good at it, but I do always feel just this inclination, desire. I guess it's part of how my brain is wired, that I have trouble explaining a thing without first saying the context for the thing.
Yeah.
And that becomes the basis and the foundation for a story. I can't talk about a thing until I talk about how we got here to the thing. And to me, just that's the element, that's the essence of storytelling. And it weaves into every presentation we build. It often weaves more than once into the presentations that we're doing, all built around that framework.
Yeah. And so what would you say to the advisor or the entrepreneur who says, yeah, Michael, Deirdre, but you don't know my clients. I'm working with engineers, or I'm working with people in tech, and they're super buttoned up and they just want the facts. And that's all they care about. Like, this story stuff is all fluffy. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, short answer would be come up with more relevant stories. Like
I love it.
To me, like that's not people don't like a story. It's people don't like a story that isn't relevant to them.
Love that.
What's their story? What's their journey? What's going on in their lives that, the story you want to tell would have some resonance to them. Just human beings are kind of hardwired to story. I mean, literally, like, it's why storytelling, story selling, connects so well. Our brains are just wired to connect with narratives. We find narratives even when there's no narrative, right? Like, right. You show a chart with random dots and people will tell you a story about the dots, even if they were actually literally truly random dots. We connect dots and find stories and narrative and everything, but no one wants to hear a story that doesn't have a takeaway for them. No one wants to hear a story that doesn't have a point, right? I always remember back to, the famous rant in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles where Steve Martin goes off and here's an idea for your stories. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting to the listener. So you know what your story is and where it's going, and that you're telling a story that actually has some connection to the person that you're trying to talk to. But our brains are just wired this way. Now, granted, some people like long stories, some people maybe like shorter stories. I don't want to too overgeneralize this. I'm sure we can find some human being who just literally hates stories.
Right.
But we're pretty much all wired this way. But if the story isn't connecting with us, if I don't have some kind of investment with the story, if I can't see myself in the story, if I don't feel some connection with the story, then it's just a boring person talking pretty quickly.
Yeah. Or TMI. That's the worst.
Or TMI.
Oh, that's painful. That's painful. All right. So as we're wrapping up this episode, I do want to talk about thought leadership. And I would love for you to share, for you, what's been the most powerful medium in establishing yourself as a thought leader? Because it's one thing to have a podcast or, be a great presenter, have a book, but you're a bona fide thought leader, which is a whole elevated level of thinking, quite frankly, and putting content out there. What's the medium?
So I'd answer this two ways, because there's kind of an essential connection between them. The short answer of what's the medium is, like, it's just your website. It's your space that you own. Like,
love that.
If you want to talk from a soapbox, the only key is you have to own a box. But you have to own a box. Like,
that's so good.
If you want to have a soapbox and all you do is go find other people's boxes to stand on, at some point they might not let you stand on their box, and then you have nothing to shout from.
Okay,
so
that's good.
If you want to have a soapbox, you got to make your own box, and it's not hard, right? Like, I can register a domain name for $9. I got to spend a little bit more money for someone to stand up a website that I can run. Like, it doesn't take much to own a piece of digital real estate today. You don't even have to own physical real estate and a box. It's just a website, but you got to have a box to stand on, and you got to own the box, because if you don't own the box, someone can take the box away from you. Right. So I fundamentally, we never built our platform on social media. We never went into LinkedIn groups and Facebook pages and all the rest. Yes, we show up there. The things on our website get sent out through those.
Yes.
But, part of this is, at least I had always heard it from Brian Clark, back then, of Copy Blogger. And, his way of framing this was don't be a digital sharecropper. Right. The challenge for sharecroppers of the past was they farmed the land, but they didn't own the land. And so at some point, the landowner changed the rules of the land, you had no crops.
Yeah.
And so if you build on Facebook or LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms, and they change the rules, they change the algorithm, they change the flow, your business can vanish overnight. When you own your property, you own your property. So don't be a digital sharecropper. Own your digital house. Own your soapbox, which to me, like, don't make it more complex than it needs to be. It's a website that has a place where you can type things and hit publish so human beings can find it and read it. That's really all it takes. And even if you go and look at some of the, incredible thought leaders out there, and particularly ones that have been doing this 15, 20 years, like back to the early days of the internet. Some of them are basically still running the website they had from 20 years ago. Like, it's just a bunch of text. It looks like nothing. People don't show up because it's pretty. They show up because of what it says and the actual substance of the content. So I'd say, like, number one is, if you want a soapbox, you got to go get a box that you own. Digital realm makes it very findable. So I'm a big fan of websites. And the other reality of, if you want to build a thought leadership platform, is you need some way to get people to come back after they see it the first time.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of us have the experience, like, oh yeah, I read this article once, like, on that thing, like, it was awesome. Oh, you remember what website it was? Yeah, I don't remember. I was surfing on the internet one night and I found a thing and I read it and it was cool. And then I moved on with life. And, like, I have no idea how to find it again. Like, maybe if I remember the words, I can go Google it. But we plow through lots of content on a continuous basis. Did smartphones and the rest make it easier and easier? At some point, if you want to actually turn this into a business, you not only need to put thought leadership out, you need some way to bring people back. And simply put, the way you bring people back is you ask them for an email address in exchange for something useful. And then you honor that by only sending them more useful things, like the thought leadership stuff that you're putting out that's relevant to them.
Yeah. So you create a lead magnet that people want, right?
Yep.
Get the email and then,
we've lived all of the medium, audio and video and written and social media, a bazillion different platforms. We've done everything from broadcasting out spontaneous video when that was hot for a while on Vine and the things that followed. Yeah. We've done pretty much every social media channel imaginable. We pushed our content lots of different ways. At the end of the day, like, if you blew up the website and everything and all of the rest, I could rebuild any business as long as I've got my email list.
Really? Yeah.
And as much as we knock email, like, it's an overflow and we get so much email and there's a lot of spam and it's overwhelming. Like, yes, all of that's true. And every other version of content is exponentially worse. I mean, you think email's overwhelming. Facebook posts are so overwhelming. Facebook filters out like 97% of them. You don't even see most of what's there, because otherwise it would be such an avalanche and torrent. You wouldn't even be able to read it and follow it all. The same thing on Twitter and most social media platforms. Like, the social media platforms figured out a long time ago, you literally have to curate the heck out of it or it's overwhelming. So, if you think your email's overwhelming, you hit delete on 50% of it. Well, great. Most social media platforms are probably blowing out 97 and 99% of what's in your social channels. I mean, they're not being Machiavellians, because otherwise it would be such a fire hose. It would be a crappy experience. You wouldn't even enjoy it. Facebook actually did tests early on where people said, stop curating my feed. Let me just see everything. So they turned it on, let people see everything. And they thought it was horrible. And they stopped using Facebook.
Interesting.
We think we want to see it all. And then when you actually get it, it's like your email on steroids. It's too much. So most of these feeds are highly, highly refined and curated by whatever the social media algorithms are, which if they change, you're out of luck, because that's what happens when you're a digital sharecropper. So own your website, own your email list, everything else we do. I mean, lots in the media, audio and video and social media world are all pathways back to our website, to our email list, because those are things I can own and build upon. I mean, we're very careful to use those in good, sacred ways, because if you blow up the trust with the people that follow you, then you have no trust, which means you have no business. So this isn't about like owning it in a greedy, be abusive way, but just, if you want to build a business, you have to own your foundation.
Love it. Own your soapbox and then double down on that email list. Thank you, Michael Kitces. So amazing to have you here. I've loved every second. I wish I had another hour, because there's so much more I want to ask you. But you have given us so much valuable content. Thank you. Where can people find you?
So easy place to find me is kitces.com. Hardest thing is just typing the name itself. So KITCES.com. I was not so lucky when the family came over and transliterated the name, but kitces.com, at Michael Kitces on Twitter and all the social media places. But kitces.com is the place you can find all of our stuff.
Awesome. And we'll put the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Crazy Good Talks podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered in this podcast represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Accelerated Performance, LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.